Have you ever looked at an old photo of yourself and felt like you were staring at a stranger? Not because your face changed, but because something inside you disappeared along the way. Maybe it was your excitement, your confidence, your curiosity, or the version of you that laughed without thinking too much. Growing up is often described as a beautiful journey, a sign of maturity and progress. People talk about independence, success, responsibility, and becoming wiser. But almost nobody talks about the quiet losses that come with it. Nobody warns you that growing up sometimes means slowly losing parts of yourself. When we are children, we exist in a very honest way. We cry when we are sad. We laugh loudly when something is funny. We ask questions without fear of sounding stupid. We dream without limits. A child can say they want to become an astronaut, a singer, a painter, and a scientist all at the same time, and nobody expects perfect logic from them. Children are naturally connected to who they are. They do not spend every second worrying about how they are perceived. They simply exist. But as we grow older, the world slowly teaches us different rules. We learn that being emotional can make people uncomfortable. We learn that failure is embarrassing. We learn that being realistic is more acceptable than being hopeful. Bit by bit, we begin editing ourselves to fit into society. At first, the changes seem small. You stop talking so much because someone called you annoying. You stop showing excitement because people think it is childish. You stop sharing your dreams because others laugh at them. Over time, these small adjustments become part of your personality, and eventually, you cannot remember who you were before all the editing began. One of the saddest parts of growing up is realizing how much fear replaces freedom. Children are not fearless because they are strong. They are fearless because they have not yet learned how harsh the world can be. They try things without overthinking. They dance badly without shame. They speak without carefully planning every sentence. But adults carry invisible scars. After enough rejection, disappointment, criticism, and heartbreak, people become careful. They stop doing things they once loved because they are afraid of looking foolish. They silence themselves before anyone else can silence them first. You can see this change everywhere. A child will draw a picture proudly, even if it makes no sense. An adult can spend hours worrying about posting one photo online because they are afraid of judgment. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, many people lose their ability to feel free. They become observers of life instead of participants in it. Another painful thing about growing up is how responsibilities slowly consume your identity. When people ask children who they are, children often answer with their interests. I like dinosaurs. I love music. I enjoy climbing trees. But adults usually answer with roles. I'm a manager. I'm a student. I'm a parent. I work in marketing. Over time, many people become so focused on surviving that they forget what genuinely makes them feel alive. Life becomes a cycle of deadlines, bills, stress, expectations, and exhaustion. There is always something that needs attention. Even rest begins to feel unproductive. Many adults no longer know how to relax without guilt. They sit down to rest, but their minds continue racing. There are emails to answer, goals to achieve, problems to solve. Slowly, hobbies disappear. Creativity disappears. Spontaneity disappears. People become efficient, but emotionally disconnected from themselves. And perhaps the worst part is that society often praises this transformation. People admire those who sacrifice everything for work. They respect people who never complain and always stay productive. Being tired becomes normal. Being emotionally numb becomes normal. People say, "That's just adulthood," as if losing yourself is simply part of the process. But deep inside, many adults quietly grieve who they used to be. Sometimes it happens unexpectedly. You hear an old song that once meant everything to you. Suddenly, memories return. You remember the version of yourself who listened to that song with hope in their heart. Or maybe you walk past a place from your childhood and feel a strange sadness you cannot explain. It is not only nostalgia. It is the realization that certain parts of you no longer exist in the same way. Some people lose their creativity. Others lose their confidence. Some lose their softness because life forced them to become emotionally guarded. Some lose their trust in others. Some lose their ability to dream. And many people lose their connection with themselves because they spend so much time becoming who the world expects them to be. Growing up also changes relationships in painful ways. As children, friendships often feel effortless. You can become best friends with someone simply because you both enjoy the same game or sit next to each other in class. But adulthood complicates everything. Time becomes limited. Priorities change. People move away emotionally and physically. Some friendships disappear without any dramatic ending. One day, you simply realize you no longer talk. That kind of loss is difficult because there is no clear moment to grieve. Nobody teaches us how to mourn relationships that fade slowly. Yet these experiences change us deeply. Every goodbye leaves a mark. Every disappointment adds another layer of emotional distance. Over time, people become more cautious with love and friendship. They protect themselves more. They trust less easily. In trying to avoid pain, they sometimes lose the openness that once made relationships meaningful. Even family relationships can change as we grow older. There comes a moment when you stop seeing your parents as powerful figures and start noticing their exhaustion, their fears, and their aging. This realization can feel heartbreaking. You begin understanding that adults never truly have everything figured out. They are simply trying their best while carrying burdens nobody else can fully see. Growing up means realizing that life is more fragile than you once believed. Dreams do not always come true. Good people still suffer. Love does not guarantee permanence. Effort does not always lead to success. This knowledge creates emotional weight. It changes the way people move through the world. At the same time, social media has made this experience even more complicated. In the past, people mainly compared themselves to those around them. Now, they compare themselves to millions of strangers every day. Adults are constantly exposed to carefully edited versions of other people's lives. Someone is always more successful, more attractive, more talented, or seemingly happier. This endless comparison slowly damages self-worth. Many people begin abandoning parts of themselves because they think those parts are not impressive enough. They stop enjoying simple things because simple things do not look successful online. They chase achievement after achievement, hoping they will finally feel complete. But external validation can never fully replace inner connection. The strange thing is that many adults become strangers to themselves without even noticing it immediately. It happens gradually. One day you realize you have not laughed genuinely in months. Or maybe you cannot remember the last time you felt excited about something. Perhaps you notice that you are always tired, always distracted, always emotionally distant. You continue functioning because life requires it, but inside, something feels missing. And yet, despite all this, there is something deeply human about these losses. Growing up hurts because caring hurts. Loving hurts. Existing hurts. Every experience shapes us, including the painful ones. The goal is not to remain exactly the same forever, because that is impossible. Change is natural. The real tragedy is not changing. The tragedy is abandoning yourself completely in order to survive. Some people become so focused on being accepted that they silence their real personality. Others become so afraid of failure that they stop trying new things altogether. Some become emotionally unavailable because vulnerability once caused them pain. Slowly, survival instincts replace authenticity. But maybe healing begins when people start noticing what they lost. Noticing is important because you cannot reconnect with yourself if you refuse to acknowledge the distance. Many adults spend years ignoring their emotional emptiness. They stay busy because silence forces them to confront uncomfortable truths. But eventually distractions stop working. The loneliness remains. The exhaustion remains. The feeling of disconnection remains. Sometimes healing starts with very small moments. You listen to music you used to love. You return to an old hobby. You speak honestly for the first time in a long time. You allow yourself to feel emotions instead of hiding them. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are often the beginning of rebuilding a relationship with yourself. It is important to understand that not every lost part of yourself needs to remain lost forever. The creative child inside you may still exist beneath the stress. The hopeful version of you may still exist beneath the disappointments. The soft and trusting part of you may still exist beneath the emotional walls you built for protection. Growing up changes people, but it does not completely erase who they once were. In fact, some of the strongest people are not those who never lost themselves. They are the people who managed to find pieces of themselves again after life tried to harden them. That process is not easy. It requires honesty. It requires vulnerability. It requires letting go of the idea that adulthood must always look serious and emotionally controlled. Sometimes maturity is not about becoming colder. Sometimes true maturity means allowing yourself to remain human in a world that constantly pressures people to become machines. You do not need to destroy your softness in order to survive. You do not need to abandon your passions to be respected. You do not need to become emotionally numb to be considered strong. There is a difference between growing up and disappearing. Many people think adulthood means sacrificing every emotional part of themselves in exchange for stability. But a life where you completely lose your identity is not truly stability. It is emotional survival. And survival alone is not enough for a meaningful life. At some point, people must ask themselves difficult questions. What parts of me disappeared because life naturally changed me? And what parts disappeared because I became afraid? Those are very different things. Fear can quietly shape an entire personality. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of being judged. Over time, these fears convince people to shrink themselves. They stop expressing opinions. They stop taking risks. They stop dreaming openly. Eventually, They begin living smaller lives than they truly want. But deep down, most people still carry traces of who they once were. You can hear it in the way someone suddenly becomes excited while talking about an old passion. You can see it in moments when adults laugh freely without thinking. For a brief second, the heavy mask disappears, and their real self returns. Perhaps that is why nostalgia feels so emotional. It is not only about missing the past. It is about missing versions of ourselves that felt more alive. Growing up means losing parts of yourself. Yes. But maybe it also means learning which parts are worth fighting to keep. Because life will always try to shape you. Responsibilities will grow. Pain will happen. People will disappoint you. The world will constantly pressure you to become more efficient, more productive, more controlled. But even then, you still deserve to protect the parts of yourself that make life meaningful. Your curiosity, your creativity, your kindness, your ability to feel deeply, your ability to hope. Those things matter more than most people realize. At the end of the day, nobody escapes change. We all lose certain versions of ourselves as we move through life. That is part of being human. But perhaps real growth is not about becoming someone completely different. Perhaps real growth is learning how to carry your younger self with compassion instead of leaving them behind entirely. Because the child you once were is still somewhere inside you, quietly waiting to be remembered.